Well, good morning, everyone. It is Sunday, January the 17th, and I'm so glad that you are tuning in for our Bible class as we continue our way to work our way, that is, through the book of Proverbs. If you're joining us for the first time, thank you so very much for tuning in. Hope that you'll be encouraged by your time with us, that you'll get something out of it, that you'll think it's worth your time, and that you'll want to come back and be with us anytime that you can. Well, we're in Proverbs chapter 23, and so if you've got your Old Testaments, that's where you want to turn. Before we start in Proverbs 23, verse 10 is where we're going to begin today. I want to actually go back to chapter 22. Take a look at verse 17 because that's the introduction of the section that we're in. The section that we're in begins here in verse 17 of chapter 22. It goes all the way through chapter 24, and it is what some call the 30 sayings. Here in this section, you will have 30 important sayings, 30 exhortations. It's introduced here in verse 17 through 21. I just want to look at the introduction very quickly again. Look at it, verse 17. Incline your ear and hear the words of the wise and apply your mind to knowledge. And so as he begins this section, as he's about to lay on them 30 important sayings, he first of all exhorts them to listen. Listen very closely to what I have to say. Incline your ear to the words of the wise. Hear the words. Apply your mind to my knowledge. And then in verse 18 and 19, I already told you this once, but again, just a little background. There he gives really two reasons to listen. One is to develop personal integrity and growth. The other is because it's going to draw you closer to God. Take a look, verse 18 and 19. For it will be pleasant if you keep them within you, that they may be ready on your lips. It's going to be good for you. If these things are in you, you're so familiar with them that you're ready to share them. It's going to be a blessing to you. It's going to bless your life. And then he says in verse 19, so that your trust may be in the Lord, I have taught you today, even you. And so the idea there, so that you may trust in the Lord, it's going to also draw you closer to God. So these are really important sayings. They have great value. So he wants us to listen. Let's listen. Take a look. Chapter 23, verse 10. This is saying number 10, verses 10 and 11. Do not move the ancient boundary or go into the fields of the fatherless, for their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their case against you. Okay, what you have here, kind of the background, what it is envisioning here is a court battle where one party has seized the property of another. Now, take a look at it again. He says, do not move the ancient boundary or go into the fields of the fatherless. Most of you probably know we've mentioned this from time to time whenever we've come across reference to this in a context or a setting. But property was, and really still is in a very real sense, there are markers that designate them. And in ancient times, oftentimes those markers were boundary stones. And, they were, to move a boundary stone was literally stealing. Because if you move a boundary stone over 3 feet, then you've stolen 3 feet of land. And so, this was all about integrity and theft. And so, what he's saying here, and notice that he says, or go into the fields of the fatherless. What he's emphasizing here is that it is easy to exploit some people. Here they're described as the fatherless. It would be a person who is weak. They just don't have a lot of power. They don't have a lot of recourse. And so what God is essentially saying here is, they may look like they're weak, they may look like they're powerless, but they're really not powerless. In fact, on their side is God. In fact, God here takes the role of the attorney for the weaker person. Verse 11, for their Redeemer, whose Redeemer? Well, the first verse 10 there, the fatherless, the weak. For their Redeemer is strong. And Redeemer here in the New American Standard is a capital R. It's clearly a reference to God. Their Redeemer is strong. He will plead their case against you. He will take their side. God does not, fundamental to His nature, He is angry with those who exploit people, especially people who are powerless and weak and vulnerable. And so, again, this is an exhortation then not to exploit the weak and the powerless and the vulnerable. We're to take their side. We're to defend them because God certainly defends them. So being sensitive to those who are weaker. Look at verse 12. This is saying number 11. Apply your heart to discipline and your ears to the words of knowledge. Apply your heart to discipline. Apply your ears to the words of knowledge. He's saying, don't take the acquisition of wisdom lightly. Be serious about it. Don't be casual about it. Make your quest for wisdom to be one of your most important quests. It should be something that, the value is so great. We kind of casually approach things that don't really matter. Why invest a lot of time? Why invest a lot of energy? Why invest a lot of resources in something that, really don't matter? Save your strength and save your energy and save your resources for things that really, really count. Be judicious. Well, yeah, that's how we think. Well, what he's saying here is, listen, when it comes to acquiring wisdom, you ought to understand that that is the most valuable thing. Of course, that supports so many other things we've seen in the book of Proverbs up to this point. Remember things like, wisdom is more precious than treasures that you'll find in a field. We've had those images. We need to search for it like we would search for buried treasure. It has enormous value. It has more value than any riches you can conceive of. It can change your life. It can change the life of those you influence. And most of all, it can change your eternity. So don't take the acquisition of wisdom lightly. Listen, I think that's part of the reason you're tuning in here. And I'm so glad. And I hope it's part of the reason that after our study of Proverbs is over, you're not going to lay Proverbs on the shelf. You're going to recognize how valuable it is, and it's going to become an important part of your regular Bible study and meditation. You've heard me say it before, so I'm just going to take advantage of this opportunity to say it again. This is one of those books that you would be blessed if you just read a chapter every day of your life. One chapter. Now, what that means, of course, because it's about 31 chapters, you're going to be reading it every month of your life. Look, it's only going to take you a couple of minutes, but it's going to remind you of these great, great principles of wisdom. And so, this is part of, don't take the acquisition of wisdom lightly. Apply your heart to discipline. And apply your ears to the words of knowledge. Okay. Look at verse 13. We mentioned this one a couple of weeks ago. Maybe it was last week. The weeks start running together on me. But it's about discipline. It's saying number 12. It's verse 13 and 14. Take a look at it. Do not hold back discipline from the child. Although you strike him with a rod, he will not die. You shall strike him with a rod and rescue his soul from Sheol. Now, first of all, let's be reminded what Sheol is. In the Hebrew mind, Sheol was the place of the dead. It's the grave. We could say it this way: you will rescue his soul from death. So, the importance of discipline. Discipline is going to help prevent future disaster. That's what he's saying. You know, when you think about disaster, the ultimate disaster is losing your life. Especially if it's lost through foolishness and bad decisions and choices. Sometimes, obviously, there's nothing you can do. Accidents happen. People of wisdom die. But this is talking about the individual who, because of their own bad choices, pay the ultimate price. But of course, when it talks about rescuing his soul from Sheol, we can kind of take that, and we should take that principle to not just mean, death, but just disaster. You can experience disaster and still live. The point, though, again, is that discipline is so critical in helping prevent those we love, our children in this setting, in this context, our children from disaster. Don't hold it back. Although you strike him with a rod. And I think we talked about that. Well, we did talk about it when we looked at verse 15 of chapter 22. Foolishness is bound up in the heart of a child. The rod of discipline will remove it far from him. You have that imagery of the rod of discipline. Here it's talking about striking him with the rod. As I've said before, I'll say it again. This is not brutalizing. There is a difference between a proper spanking and brutalizing someone, brutalizing a child. It is unfortunate that our world, I've said this before, I'll say it again, it is unfortunate that our world has, redefined things and spun things to where they have categorized all reasonable, balanced, properly administered spanking with brutalizing. And there is a difference. There is a huge, huge difference. Spanking, for instance, when it's done properly, it is actual discipline. The parent who appropriately spanks, they know the situation that they will apply that form of discipline to. Usually it's because of defiant rebellion. You've drawn a line, you've said no, you've established boundaries, and they defiantly step across that boundary. Well, to benefit them, they've got to learn to respect boundaries, that boundaries are there to protect. Boundaries are there to prevent them from going headlong off a cliff. Boundaries are there to prevent their life from becoming a disaster. They've got to learn and appreciate boundaries, and they've got to learn and appreciate authority. And so those who properly administer a spanking, it is done with purpose. It is done with careful thought. It is done when a clear violation has occurred that is worthy of a spanking. It's not arbitrary violence. It's not, just, having a bad day and you walk in and, you step on a toy and, you hurt your foot and then you just beat your child. That's not what that is. That person hasn't given any thought to anything. There's not any purpose behind that. It's just an outburst of rage. There is nothing of value in it. Anybody with one eye and a half sense understands the difference. And this is not an arbitrary, brutal beating someone gets. This is a carefully considered, purposely done application of an appropriate amount of pain to reinforce boundaries. So discipline is very important to prevent disaster from your child. Now, of course, we all know, and I might as well throw in this caveat, it doesn't always work. You can discipline and shape, and then they grow up and they have their own free will, and they're no longer under your influence. And, oftentimes they'll decide to do stupid things and things that violate basic wisdom. Things that you've warned them about, boundaries you've established, and they're going to do it anyway. And they may experience, and often do experience, a disaster of some form in their life. They may lose a job. They may get in an accident because they were, somewhere where they shouldn't have been and doing something that they shouldn't have been doing. And, it could have lingering repercussions from that. Just because you do this, it's not a guarantee. Keep in mind, these are Proverbs. But to give your kids the best chance of averting disaster, self-inflicted disaster in life, discipline is absolutely critical. It will help prevent disaster. Okay, look at verse 15 and 16. This is saying number 13. My son, if your heart is wise, my own heart will also be glad, and my inmost being will rejoice when your lips speak what is right. We all know that's the case. My son, if your heart is wise, my own heart will be glad. If you see your kids make good decisions and they apply wisdom, they embrace wisdom, they follow the path of wisdom, it brings a sense of pride to your heart. It brings a sense of joy and satisfaction to your heart. Now, what he seems to be doing here, he's not just saying, son, it makes me so proud and so happy when I see that you're following the path of wisdom. What he's trying to do here is trying to motivate him or her to follow the path of wisdom by saying, when you follow the path of wisdom, I'm so proud of you. It's giving pleasing of parents, pleasing your teachers, pleasing your parents. That should be a source of motivation to us. Now, a lot of times, frankly, it is not. I mean, there are cases, maybe you've experienced this with your own kids, where you try to play this same card, and you try to appeal to them of the hurt that their behavior is bringing to you. But the joy that would be brought to them if they change if they change their behavior. But they're so absorbed in their own self-interest that they don't care about your pride in them. They don't care about your satisfaction with them. They don't care about any of that. But there are some people who do care. And that does motivate them. I really want to make my dad proud. I want to make my mom proud. I want to make my so-and-so proud. I want them to be proud of me and see that what they invested in me, see how it paid off. So that's what he's doing here. Okay, let's look at verse 17 at saying number 14. It's verse 17 and 18. Do not let your heart envy sinners, but live in the fear of the Lord always. Surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. All right. Don't let your heart envy sinners. Okay, what does that mean? Don't let your heart envy sinners. Well, why in the world might our heart envy sinners? Well, you know this. We all know this. Because, sometimes as we watch sinners, it's what we're watching unfold really looks like the good life. The commercials, TVs, movies, presents the good life, a life of just hedonistic pursuits. Hey, man, if you've got this itch, scratch it. It'll make you so happy. It'll feel so good. You're going to have an incredible time. And so as we watch that, sin is, and again, I've said this before and I'll always say it, I love the fact that the Bible doesn't dodge the fact that sin is pleasurable. And I always will remember a teacher of mine who said that he would tell his kids and explain to his kids, those who say that sin is fun, whether it's, and the actual, for instance, he was trying to teach his kids sexual purity as they were growing up. And what he did was, his approach was to basically tell them that it's really not as pleasurable as the world makes it out to be. And I remember thinking, this was years ago, and I remember thinking, what? Well, what are they going to think about you when they realize that you lied to them? That you lied to them. It is pleasurable. God designed it. It's, as I've often said, sexual intimacy is a good thing because it's a God thing. And there's no need to try to keep them away from it by lying to them. I like the fact that the Bible doesn't dodge sin, that sin is pleasurable. It is pleasurable for a time. But nevertheless, it's pleasurable. That's why Moses, one of the great statements there in Hebrews chapter 11, he basically said no to the pleasures of sin for a season. The pleasures of sin. He knew it would be pleasurable, but he also knew that pursuing that course was against the character and the will of God. And so that's basically what this is saying. Don't let your heart envy sinners. Don't let the good life, quote unquote, of sin distract you from, and this is where it's really important, don't let it distract you from the better life of the future. See, do not let your heart envy sinners, but live in the fear of the Lord always. Why? Verse 18, surely there is a future, and your hope will not be cut off. In the Lord, you're banking for a future. That's what Moses was banking on. He chose to endure the mistreatment of the people of God rather than enjoy the pleasures of sin for a season because he was looking for his reward. There was a future, and that's what he says here in verse 18. Don't forget the future. There is a better future, and your hope, as you cling to that future, it will not be cut off. And so this is so important. Don't let the good life of sin distract you from the reality of the future. Okay, let's look at verses 19 through 21. This would be saying number 15. Listen, my son, and be wise and direct your heart in the way. Do not be with heavy drinkers of wine or with gluttonous eaters of meat. For the heavy drinker and the glutton will come to poverty, and drowsiness will clothe one with rags. Okay, listen, I got to be honest with you. I'm down with him on the first half of verse 20. Do not be with heavy drinkers of wine. I'm a little more reluctant to embrace, or don't be with gluttonous eaters of meat. I sometimes will describe myself as a gluttonous eater of meat. You know, hey, have you been down to the, like the Rodizios, those Brazilian steakhouses where they're like carrying around all these kinds of different meats, and you have this little thing on your table, this little block, like it's either red or green, and all the people who are toting all this meat around, you flip up with green means, hey, bring it on, bring it on. You flip over red means, okay, don't even ask me for what, whether it's lamb or whether it's chicken or whether it's beef or whether it's pork or whether, oh, I'm telling you, it's so good. That's almost what I think of when it says, or with gluttonous eaters of meat. Listen, I've been with some of you to those places. And is this condemning us? I don't think so. You got to look at this in the fuller context. What this is talking about in verses 20 through 21, or 19 through 21 here, heavy drinkers of wine, gluttonous eaters of meat, and those who... the word drowsiness also there in verse 21. When you put all of that together, what he's talking about is people who all they like to do is just party. That's the only thing they got on their minds. Listen, this is not a condemnation of liking a great ribeye. It's, not a condemnation of getting that full rack of ribs. It's not a condemnation of that. It is describing a person who all they want to do is party. All their mind is focused on is a party. It's virtually never on work. It is all about indulging. And what he's saying here is you want to avoid those kinds of people. This is actually a saying about choosing friends. Listen, my son, again, verse 19, and be wise and direct your heart in the way. Do not be with heavy drinkers of wine or gluttonous eaters of meat. Don't hang out with those kind of people. They will lead you to a place that is not to your benefit. Verse 20, for the heavy drinker and the glutton will come to poverty. Well, they come to poverty because, again, that's all they care about. All they want to do is party. And drowsiness will clothe one with rags. It is a destructive life. Some people, again, they are consumed with a good time. And if you hang around people like that, they're going to get you off course. Don't hang around people like that. It will get you off course. Okay. Look at verse 22. 22 through 25. This is saying number 16. Listen to your father who begot you, and do not despise your mother when she is old. Buy truth, and do not sell it. Get wisdom and instruction and understanding. Okay, all of that there is what we've all, re-emphasizing many of the things we've already looked at, like in verse 12, about don't take the acquisition of wisdom lightly. Pursue it diligently. And so, listen to your father. Don't despise your mother. Buy truth. Don't sell it. Get wisdom. Get instruction. Get understanding. The father of the righteous will greatly rejoice. And he who sires a wise son will be glad in him. Let your father and your mother be glad, and let her rejoice who gave birth to you. Again, this is very much like what we saw there in verses 15 and 16 about making your parents proud. Make your parents proud by listening and living the godly way. That will make them so proud of you. And again, that assumes they're godly parents. If you've got godly parents, there's nothing that will make them more proud than you walking in wisdom and living in godliness. Nothing else really matters. Your kids can excel socially. They can excel professionally. They can excel financially. But if they're spiritually indifferent, they're not walking the path of wisdom, they're not fully embracing wisdom, which begins with the fear of the Lord. If they're not walking in truth, your heart is still heavy. There's a heaviness in your heart. If you are a godly parent, one who loves God and the things of God and the way of God, it doesn't matter how successful they are in any other aspect of life. If they're not walking in wisdom, then your heart, there's a heaviness to your heart. And he's saying, listen to your godly father, listen to your godly mother, make them proud by living the right way. By living the right way. Well, I was hoping that we would get through chapter 23. We didn't. We got up to verse 26, but we've been going for about 31 minutes now, and so I think it's time to close this down. So we'll pick up right here next week, next Sunday. Hope you'll join me as we continue to look at these wonderful sayings of wisdom. Until then, take care. God bless. Lord willing, I'll see you soon.